Something that's been working for me so far is doing a bunch of free work for people that have access to my customer. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that free work. If you can also bring the demand to the table, then yeah, like you're reducing so much risk in the startup's life, and especially in the first year. The venture studio model, I think once it's figured out, and maybe a few people have figured it out, is really attractive to an entrepreneur because it takes away a lot of the risk that you have to take on as an individual.
Welcome to the In the Pit podcast. I'm your host, Cody Schneider. Today, my friend Will Nelson is joining us. Will was super early at Andrew Wilkinson's company, Tiny, where he was an entrepreneur in residence there. He basically just saw tons of businesses, and he's going to lay that out in today's episode. He's now making a company that does premium customer stories for other businesses. He's also going to talk about some business ideas in here as well, and the frameworks that he learned to identify good businesses while working at Tiny. All right, let's get started with today's show. I'm good, man. How you doing? I know it's the end of your day. Are you dead already, or?
No, I just had this mushroom tea, so I'm hoping it gives me a little boost of energy for this last call. We'll see how it goes.
Totally. So for people that don't know who you are, give me 3 bullet points. I think that'll be the easiest. I met you through Twitter, naturally, and You are doing super interesting stuff. So I thought we wanted to jump on and just talk about where the things you're building. But yeah, I'll let you take it from there. I'll let you drive.
Yeah, sounds good. So I am a Canadian entrepreneur. I've previously built a bunch of businesses, sold one a couple of years ago. I was previously an entrepreneur in residence at Tiny, and now I'm building a company called 64 Stories that helps founders, CEOs, teams create a bunch of social content with video, starting with video. And so we're a few months in at this point, and yeah, things are just getting off to the races.
I love it, man. That's awesome. So, and Tiny, just for context for people if they don't know, is the holding company of Andrew, what's his last name? Sorry.
Wilkinson. Yeah.
Andrew Wilkinson. Yeah. So basically owns a bunch of internet businesses. I think he took a public recently, right? Were you a part of that or?
Oh God, no. So yeah, he did. It was this, I think it was through another company of theirs, not Meta Lab, that's their agency, another company of theirs that was previously public, and then they brought Tiny public through that. Don't ask me, but I know very little. And I was in the venture wing of Tiny, so cool. Even more removed from Andrew and that whole crew.
Nice. So were you looking at deal flow for them, or what was that role look like that you were doing there?
Yeah, I was building companies. So my job was to be an entrepreneur, which is strange. But yeah, my job was to come up with ideas, pitch them to the team, get buy-in, and then go build them. Everything from building a team to getting customers to building product, everything under the sun that an entrepreneur would handle. That was my role for a year, and yeah, had some success. We probably spun up 2 or 3 companies in that time. Anyway, I'm off doing my own thing, took an even further leap into entrepreneurship, back to my comfort zone of just being on my own.
Yeah. And you were doing that previously, right? So you founded a thing, then went residence at Tiny. I've always been curious about entrepreneur in residence and those types of roles. It was, I feel like it was a popular thing, or became popular 4 to 5 years ago. Every venture firm had these kind of positions where it was just hey, we're going to try to incubate shit and see what happens, basically. Did you like that as a founder, being in that position, or what was that like, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I think that the model can work. It was so new, still very, very new for them over there. The venture studio model, I think once it's figured out, and maybe a few people have figured it out, is really attractive to an entrepreneur because it takes away a lot of the risk that you have to take on as an individual. So they would provide you with development resources, financial, accounting resources, facilitate a bunch of introductions, provide you with a salary. Now you give up a lot of equity. So it's very suitable for a business that is focused on cash flow and profits. I don't think it's suitable in most cases for something that needs a bunch of funding because the founder would just get too diluted. So it depends on what you're building. But
totally,
it also depends on the stage that you're in as an entrepreneur. I was unsure as to what I wanted to do next after selling my business. I had a little kid on the way and wanted that extra level of security. So it seemed like a really good fit. And I was a huge fanboy of Andrew's and Tiny's for so long, and maybe got a little too excited by the opportunity of working with them.
No, it makes total sense. I think What I always found interesting is really it feels like what they're looking for is like great operators. I feel like Greg Eisenberg, this is really what he's doing is like this same kind of concept. To scale that up to another person that probably is doing this is the guy, I can't think of his name, but he's the founder of Business Insider. And he basically runs like a studio that's like this, but they're focused on, we're just making cash flowing businesses. Like this isn't venture scale, but they're doing a lot of stuff in the media space. I think that it's interesting, your insight, though, that it's like if you're trying to do venture backed, it doesn't really work. But if you're trying to make like a cash flow machine, it's like perfect for it. Anyway,
just to hop on to what you're saying about Greg, I think Greg is doing it right. He's also the right size. So not to disparage Tiny and Andrew at all, but they're a publicly traded company. I don't know what their last S1 reported, but tens of millions in profit, I think. They don't need to be as hands-on with new ventures that are being launched that have zero revenue. Greg, while I think he's very successful, is a lot smaller than that. And so him, Alex Lieberman, other people that are building their own holdcos can get in the weeds, both from demand side and an operational side. Like I get notifications for some of Greg's posts, and I saw the other day that I think a job post was missing a detail, and he was in the comments replying, being like, "Hey, like, what's the location for this?" I love that. Like he's super successful. He probably doesn't need to be doing that, but he is, and he's also hands on with lead gen. Like a lot of his posts will pump the agencies that they're building, and they're focused on cash flow. Yeah, I think I just referred someone to go work there. I think it would be a great opportunity for an entrepreneur or just an IC to go hustle over there. And
totally. Yeah. It's again, if you're an IC, like they're looking for people that are like really good and just want to, I get so much inbound literally asking that question is like, where do I find like 23-year-old just balls out people, founders that I can put in this role and they're just going to build this thing. Like I get so much inbound asking. And what's funny is I keep telling people like, they live on like Discord and like in Telegram chats. Like they're the hardest to find, but if they're in there and they're doing this, it's funny. A lot of them I feel are in the media world. They haven't even thought about B2B yet. They're like gaming, like how do I grow YouTube, like faceless YouTube channels or whatever else. And now that like SaaS has become this like interest for them. So they're like, oh, we're going to go build like a B to SMB like SaaS that sells, it basically tries to automate what they were doing. Anyway, it's funny to see. I feel like it's this new wave of like internet businesses. Like you have that venture route, which I think is really everybody. And I even have talked about it publicly. We're choosing not VC because we want to own as much of this as we can. But if there's a clear path to 100 million a year ARR, go raise money, no doubt is my view. But if you're like, okay, cool, I'm just trying to make a cash flow business that can do maybe 10 million and just at a 50% margin or whatever, like for a company like that, it's just try to figure out like, how do I do more creative financing? So so two things there. We can wrap that up. But one, to find those 23-year-old hustlers, where I've had the most luck, and I agree, it's in Discord and Telegram and in communities. If you follow, let's say, like Alex Lieberman or Greg, and they post looking for someone like that, there's probably going to be 50 people from all over the world trying to win that job or trying to win their business in some way. Totally.
One person will get that out of that 50, and it's your job to DM the other 49 and then vet them yourself. It sucks because a lot of them aren't qualified, but some of them are, and their salary expectations are quite low because they're just getting started. Like they need to prove themselves.
100%. So I started in a marketing agency, and it was the same thing. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew how to drive a fuck ton of traffic anywhere for anything and then do data analytics. But long story short, like I worked for this guy and basically did consulting to like Fortune 500 companies for like digital strategy, like how to transition from physical media into digital media type stuff. And same thing, I was getting paid. Looking back, like nothing. 2 years later, I ended up going and just like doing consulting on the side. And I was like, oh, cool. I just replaced my salary in 6 months. But for young people though, like what I found is it's basically a place to cut your teeth. And it's this, like you get so many at bats when you're working with these other people that have these resources that you just otherwise like to accumulate that knowledge and just that experience. It would take you 10 years, but you can do that in 18 months at an organization when they already have all those relationships and that trust built in. So anyway,
Yeah. And then on the other point that I was going to make, I think these like creators or people that fall on the creator spectrum, somewhere, like Greg, have this unique ability to run a venture studio or a holdco exceptionally well because they can control some of the demand if they're launching businesses that are within that are aligned, that have that creator product fit or whatever the term is. I think it's a huge advantage over a venture studio that doesn't have that and they only have capital and resources. If you can also bring the demand to the table, then yeah, like you're reducing so much risk in the startup's life, and especially in the first year.
100%. Demand's harder than product, right? Like now, I think more than ever.
Yeah.
Especially on the software side. Yeah.
It seems like that's a skill set that you have dialed down, but yeah, demand is absolutely more important than product.
Just a student of the game, man. That's like half of these calls is just like, how do I download all? I was talking to my friend, he's a winemaker, and I make wine every year, once a year. And I'm going to do that for 50 years. So in my life, I'm going to get 50 at-bats. So my job as a winemaker is to know every other winemaker and download every piece of information that I can from them so that my at-bats are 20 a year rather than just one a year. And that's how I'm going to be like one of the best in my space. And so that honestly, like the conversation with him was really a catalyst for all of this. Even I was very much on the side of I don't want to talk about anything in public because it's just not. I think social is cancer, full stop. But from that, it was like this is a way for me to have conversations with people like you that have done these other things, and I can take all of that information and knowledge that you have, and suddenly I just got 5 at bats that I couldn't get basically. But anyway,
go ahead. With that said, I wanted to come to the table with something. So I've been thinking about, just broadly speaking, what I can learn from other business models and industries and bring that into my space. So one example is how e-commerce typically goes to market right now, or one strategy, and that's seeding product. So let's say you have one SKU, 1,000 items. We'll send that out to 1,000 creators with the hope that 10 of them, 20 of them, I'm just making up numbers, will create a piece of content that either goes viral or you can then reuse to promote. What's the equivalent for that in B2B? Something that's been working for me so far is doing a bunch of free work for people that have access to my customer. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that free work. So I'll host one-on-one content interviews. I'll build a database of like viral or content that I think would resonate with my client's ideal customer, build that library of content for them, and then say, hey, like all of that is free. If you want to keep doing this, here's my rate. Let's go. But I don't have a physical product to ship them. All I can do is give away an hour of my time to do that. And there's a cost, but it's not, I think if you just do the math, it'll pay off in time. I think that's super interesting. That one
100%.
idea.
So I got 3 things to piggyback off of this. So my friend runs this B2 SMB company software. It's basically like people that sell stuff on Etsy. I think it's actually like one of the first episodes of this show. Like when I talked to him, I need to have him back on again because they're like way bigger now than what they were when we first had a conversation. So what he basically does is goes and he sponsors YouTube influencers, of the ones that are basically like, here's how to make money online type stuff. And then they basically do his product. So he has like, base structures the fees where it's like he pays upfront for the video cost. They do a video a month that's like dedicated, or he sponsors all the videos. And then they also have a recurring payout from their affiliate like URLs. So creates this lock-in where it's like, if I leave this company, like I don't get paid. Anyway, that's one thing I've seen, like something we're starting to experiment in, that we're starting to see some success in on Swell's side, which I'm super excited about. The other thing that I think like this doing free work for them. So this has been our cold like DM email strategy for like a part of our customer segment is like the solo creator podcaster type. Like another group is marketing like organizations at companies or like podcast networks, agencies. But for that solo creator, what we found is like, hey, if we just let me make you like a ton of clips about your last episode or write like all this content for you, etc. And what we're doing is just using the software as the vehicle for that. There is that cost with it, but it's this acquisition piece, right? So it's almost taking that UGC strategy strategy traditionally, where it's like, oh, I'd send this out to a creator and then I pay them or whatever for that deal. Yeah, just to your point though, it's like I then can take that media that like, so like on the YouTuber side, we're layering on, just again to bring up the things that we're seeing work, we're layering on ad spend on top of those videos so that it goes more viral on the platform. And then that also creates this, like, we don't really tell the creators this, that we're going to layer on this. So they're like, oh, this video got way more views than I normally get. So it creates this like kind of psychological incentive for them to go do that. And then the other component of it is we see that like more people that see it, that it also turns into like more referral traffic for us. And so there's these kind of like we've dedicated this amount of ad spend to basically be a part of that. So it's okay, cool. We have our budget for like the creator negotiations. This is how much we're willing to pay these people to do these dedicated videos. But then also when we actually get the link created, then we go and we'll do that marketing on top of that to those videos. And so what we've seen other companies do with this is basically that's how they like when you have how I'm thinking about it is if I can get 200 YouTube videos published about the product, right, and create some virality around one of those, maybe 5% of those will hit and outperform the rest of them. But if just a couple of those hit, right, that 5%, so we'll say 10 of them do out of that 200, then like I know that other creators, without us even talking to them, are going to join our referral network and then go and do videos about that. And so it creates this growth flywheel. Anyways, yeah, I feel like that's like similar in idea to what you're talking about. Like yours is like that service company side. And then there's this whole other side of, okay, how do I do that within software, but take that idea from the UGC? So I think that's super interesting. But
yeah.
So talk to me about how you're tactically doing that. Like when you do, is it just you, that space? Can you scale that where it's like team members are handling that work for you? Or are you looking at this, this is a super high touch thing that I have to do in the beginning, like as this service business founder?
Yeah. So right now I'm not interested in, not that I'm not interested, I'm not focused on scaling. I said today on Twitter or somewhere that I just want 10 clients that never want to cancel. So I'm at the stage where I just want to deliver exceptional value. And then if I have someone that's saying this is unbelievable, then I can start to think about scaling it. So yeah, it's super high touch right now. I'm fine with that. I know it's not as attractive of a business model, but I'm not in the stage of scaling. So I shouldn't allocate effort to that. And by the way, like, this all falls under, this isn't new. What I just said isn't a new concept. All I'm doing is leading with value or giving something away for free and hope that I get some value or something valuable to me back at some point. Like Alex Hormozi wrote a whole book about this. But yeah, I think it's another example of putting money in the bank before you go to the ATM. Like you have to give someone something, unless you're like really credible and trustworthy and have a big following like the Greg Eisenbergs of the world. I'm a nobody on Twitter and LinkedIn, so I need to do something that makes me stand out. I don't have a bunch of logos. Yeah. I'm also doing this in an email campaign. So when we spoke last, we were talking about Apollo. You told me about a campaign that was performing really well for you. I didn't copy it, but drew inspiration from it. So I'm doing an outreach campaign right now where I'm inviting people to a podcast and I'll host these one-on-one content interviews. And the pitch is like, hey, I'm going to create a bunch of short form clips with you that are super tailored to your audience. Like it might be a podcast, but really it's a bunch of content. It's like a library of content that you, that's the outcome that you get from this. And hopefully the outcome is you increase your deal flow. So
I think founders are starting to realize how like impactful this is to like, so my friend's coming on the show like in 2 days from now. And I've been helping him build this podcast for his business. He does equipment leasing for biotech. So he now has an email list of 23,000. It's basically every seed to series B founder is on this list and listen to this show every week. And in the last 2 weeks, he's basically closed like partnerships with 3 Fortune 100 companies that want to sponsor the show. And one of the biggest banks in the world right now is their like biotech arm is like trying to get in a relationship with him. And this is like in 7 months, they basically accomplished this whole thing by just like creating this super niche podcast just for biotech founders. So
wait, was this done with like through an outreach campaign? Or no?
We combined a bunch of things. So basically what we did is like made the show. It's called like the Biotech Star Podcast. We named the show that. We then scraped every email that's a founder in the biotech space. And then we put them on a list and we started sending them the episodes. And then we ran Facebook ads and ran Facebook ads with deep links to the episodes so that they would get downloads. And then we did podcast SEO so that they would start to rank basically for like all the keywords related to what they wanted to rank for. So if you search biotech, they come up right on any of the podcasting platforms. So with that though, like they're going to have this media arm that now suddenly they have leverage where they can go and negotiate with a top 5 bank, right? And that top 5 bank is worried about not getting in relationship with them because they have this direct line of communication like to them. And this is a 10-person team that's been doing this for 7 months, right? But like all of that media like that they make, they turn it into clips, they turn it into blog posts, they turn it into all of this, right? Like it's this playbook that I'm starting to see these B2B companies do. And like exactly what you're talking about. Every founder now, like they can create, like they can basically make themselves famous within this like small ass niche, but the value that like that has to their company, especially when they're going to like $1 million ARR or 10 million ARR, is so dramatic. Like the impact there. So anyways, what you're doing, I'm just like, fuck, like if I wasn't doing what I'm doing right now, I'd probably go into that because it's just I feel like it's just, you're just providing so much impact to those founders.
Yeah. I'm curious thank you, but I'm super curious to know like how you can convert a seemingly endless list that you can get from Apollo or Built With or whatever your source is into an owned list. So you're helping this person direct that traffic to a podcast. So then you're owning that audience a little bit there. Maybe that podcast can then refer them to a newsletter. But
they're on a newsletter. So we're not even cold emailing them. Like I'm gray listing this and we're sequencing in 200 people, or sorry, I think 350 now a day. And those people literally every week, they get an email that's like podcast, name of the episode. And we see open rates that are 40% plus, click-through rates that are 5% plus, unsubscribes that are 0.6%. And like the list grows, like we're going to grow the list probably, it'll be at 100,000, I bet, by the end of the year for them. And on that newsletter, like every week, every person in biotech, like the goal of this thing, right, is like every person in biotech is going to get an email, but it won't like this whole newsletter thing. Like the challenge is like, how do I make content? So I was just talking to my girlfriend about this like 2 days ago because I had this epiphany, but like with newsletters, it's what's the content that I'm going to distribute? So podcasts are this way that you basically can create content really easily by having smart people on like you. And then you're basically just like having them share all their knowledge. And I just take that transcript and I turn that into that newsletter. Like this is something that we built into Swell, right? Like it's just like out of the box. So now suddenly I have this newsletter and I can email that out every week to whoever my target ICP is. They don't even think it's marketing yet. Like they don't even think podcasts are marketing yet. It's not like they're like, oh, this is an educational piece of content. Like I have like my list for In the Pit podcast. It's a scraped list. It's every startup founder in the US that's seed to Series A. Okay. The list is 12,000 now. The open rate I got on the last email was 65%. All of these people are funded and I'm in front of them on a weekly basis with content. That's basically, here's how to grow companies and talking to people, right? So have the call to action in that newsletter. Like I can, at the bottom, I'm like, yo, whatever like brought to you by or sponsored by. So like the Biotech Startups podcast, doing the exact same thing. Like you need equipment leasing, boom, we are here every week. So the podcast is like a disguise for this branded content. It also solves that problem of what do I send to this list every week? I'm not having to go like dig through. I'm not having to do newsletter work, right? Like these daily newsletters, like I talked to some of the owners of these and they're like, yo, it's exhausting. Like we're constantly looking for like new things. Like that's my job is literally to try to find interesting things. And you're just on this content treadmill. And we're in contrast. So where I'm at with this is you could build these newsletters out. So say you get 500,000 people on a list and you're just sending out podcasts to it. Like I can go sell ad space on that newsletter, especially if it's in like a tech space for God knows what. It'll cover the cost and also cover the growth of that media asset is how I'm thinking about it. And so all of that together is like where I see this going. There's this part of me, I'm like, once we get swell to a super stable place, like I think I'm going to go build like a podcast network and just go after every category that's like B2B marketing, B2B content, like anything that's related to that, and then build out this whole network and have every head of growth or like the head of growth podcast, right? Or the head of marketing podcast, and every head of growth, every head of marketing in the US have those people listen to this thing on a weekly basis. And literally the whole strategy is I just get their peers to come on and talk about themselves and like what they're doing. And then all the other heads of growth have that learning. But then I suddenly have this newsletter with 20,000 people. It's not a huge list, right? But it's every head of growth that has a 5 million marketing, whatever. So anyway, that's like where my head's at with all this right now.
That's super, super interesting. As long as you're not crossing a line of landing in spam buckets, which you're not, then it's brilliant. And because I think what you're doing is, in a way, Mr. Beast's marketing funnel. So his cost of acquisition is zero, right? If he gives away $1 million, he was given $1 million from a brand. Let's say it's a consumer app. He then goes and spends that money on a video. So he's net zero on that video, but his audience grew by whatever number of millions. He then has that following to then go sell t-shirts, chocolate bars, formerly burgers, whatever he wants to sell. What you're doing is very similar. So if you were to only have newsletters and this podcast as your acquisition channel, you could theoretically cut your cost of acquisition to zero if you have a brand that's willing to sponsor that. Now, maybe that's your brand for the time being. So it's not zero, but you could have another company come in there and sponsor it because you have an audience of, let's say, creators or founders, whatever that group is.
Totally.
Is that accurate? Do you think?
100%. That's like how I'm looking at it, right? It's like, cool, this creates inbound for us, creates notoriety and trust. And I get to have a conversation like if I can be in every startup founder's ears every week, right? Having conversations on here's how we're seeing other people grow their businesses, right? Whether it's software, whether it's services, just internet companies, and talking about the strategies and the tactics that people are using. Think about what value that provides. So we did this at Rupa Health. So this is the last company I was at. And this is where this whole kind of idea came from. Really, it came from five or 6 years ago. I was reading this book and it was talking about like these media companies that you have no idea about. One of them is called Arrow Electronics, biggest electronics components reseller in the world, $6 billion like company, right? Like market cap's huge. Nobody knows they exist. Their whole strategy is like they own basically every like media brand that exists related to like electronic components. They own it. Magazines, blogs, website, emails, newsletter, anything, right? Like they own that whole sphere, and this all is just funneled down into it. And so it was that, and then learning how like Red Bull is actually just a media company that sells a product. It's not a product company that makes media. Like people get that backwards.
Yeah. By the way, if you go, and this is very well known, but it's maybe worth saying, if you go to Instagram's or Red Bull's socials, you won't see a post with a physical product in it.
100%. And so we had this epiphany. I was like, okay, like let's switch the script and let's have every company think about them as a media company that makes product, not a product company that makes media. Creators were the first ones to do this, especially ones that they sold like CPG products, right? Why is Mr. Beast doing chocolate? It's because CPG is really scalable. Like why is Logan doing Prime? CPG is super scale. Why are these beauty creators doing their own products, right? Like it's because CPG is super scalable. So we at Rupa, we were like, okay, let's try to just build this media brand and see how big we can get it. So we ended up taking it to 100,000 followers on Instagram. We took a podcast into the top 10 marketing podcasts. And the whole idea here was like, we're going to create all of this media leverage within the market so that we can go and negotiate with these larger companies that otherwise wouldn't talk to us, but they don't know how to do marketing because nobody knows how to do marketing well in B2B, like at this scale. And so this is again, like how to get back to your question of, is this what you're doing? Like how I'm looking at this is if I can have every person that works at Series A, B, and seed like startups
on a podcast listening to that on a weekly or monthly basis, right? Like, what leverage does that give us long term for when trying to sell marketing software to these people? Like, why is HubSpot building out this whole marketing podcast network?
Yeah.
It's literally that exact same strategy. It's so that they can then go and they can put whatever they want on those rails. I'm just doing that same thing, way smaller scale, obviously, but I think that can be scaled down for any founder. If I was just like, again, if I just raised a seed or I raised an A, the first thing I would do is I'd be like, cool, what is my target customer? Who are every one of them? How do I find every email address related to them? Now I'm going to go interview the thought leaders in our space, and I'm going to email every person on that list this podcast episode. And within a year, you will be known by every person in your industry that is trying to buy your product. Like, it's that, this is clockwork. And then the byproduct of it is like, oh, cool. Now we have clips for every channel. Now we have posts for every channel. Now you can repurpose that content into this whole thing. But I think it's just starting to happen. Like, people are starting to think about this, but I've done it now in 4 different places. So I've done it in health, I've done it in insurance, and I've done it in biotech. It feels like it can work in all, like, each of these places. So anyways, getting back to like your business, like, I feel like what you're doing is like this wave is happening, and you're just like, I'm going to be the vehicle that basically is providing this service to accomplish this, because none of them know how to do it as well. That's this whole other piece. So sorry.
Yeah. And I don't know what that monologue is. I love it. I love when you just go off. Yeah. I want to be that like pitchfork for this play. If you need, I see the business as both post-production and creative. So if you already have your podcast going, if you already have a bunch of people on your team that are creating content, I want to flatten the curve to get that content out at scale. That's just table stakes now. I know that can be automated a lot, but from what I've seen, you still need someone clicking some of the buttons. And so I want to be that team that's clicking the buttons. If you don't know what to create, or your content's not working, I want to be the creative layer on top of that. So that's like the Patty Galloway to Mr. Beast. I want to be that, to be the B2B founder or CEO or team. But
there's this new role. Sorry, go ahead. I want to pitch you something that I'm seeing, but
okay. I'll pitch you first before I get, and we'll come back. So put a pin in that. I love your playbook. I think that you can flatten the curve even further to create content. And that's by doing what, again, stealing from other business models and industries. Do what PewDiePie on YouTube used to do, or still does. I don't know. And Mr. Beast does. They react to content. They comment on content. And so you don't need someone else on the other side. This meeting was pretty easy to set up, but there's still calendar coordination, things pop up, time zones need to align, whatever. There are some barriers to getting 2 people on a call together. What I could do, though, is record myself for an hour going through your tweets, your content, maybe someone similar to you, and just teasing out all of the insights that have already been shared. Either I add to them, I comment on them, I react to them, I remix it somehow. I'm basically the Fred again, or a DJ of B2B content versus the jazz musician of content. There's no need for us to be, not no need. There's less need now with the amount of content that's being created to create net new content. So there's a play in the playbook to just go repurpose other stuff that already exists. And so my idea the other day that I was really excited about, and you can judge this idea, maybe it's a bad one, is to go live once a week, once a day, and go through my process of finding content that's super relevant to either me and my business or my clients' businesses, and comment on why it's working. Or do the Reacts channel, but do it in a live way. The reason that this is interesting is because I think you get there's a handful of reasons, but one, you get a lot more source content to work with. So you don't just get 40 minutes or an hour, or however long we're going to be on today. You could do this. You could live stream like half your day if you wanted to. There's no barrier to start. You just have to click record, and it doesn't have to be live. Anyway, there's a handful of others. I tweeted about it. I won't bore you, but the idea is to figure out what barriers there are to creating that long form content that you can then repurpose or share with your ICP to add value with them. That's just one idea. What do you think?
Dude, I love it. So again, just this happened in the last week, but had this epiphany where I was like, oh, cool. So my whole Twitter strategy is like 10 tweets a day. And then whatever's working, we double down on that and we go deeper. So I just every Sunday sit down and I write like all the content out for the week. I've been trying to figure out how the fuck to do YouTube. And I'm like podcast is a version of it, but it's a way different user that like is listening to an hour-long video rather than a 10-minute. And so what I came to the conclusion on was like, cool, like I see that typically every day one tweet goes more viral than the rest of them. So let's just take that idea, let's expand on it, because everybody's always, oh, can I get more clarity or that type of thing? And now I have this cool, I'll just sit here literally right where I am and like I'm going to film this one today. But here's how I would start a GA4 dashboard agency. This would be my whole process, right? First off, here's why people like it. They like it for X, Y, or this is why it would be a good business. They like it for X, Y, Z. Everything changed to GA4. Nobody knows how to use it. They're paying consultants like $5,000 a month to build these things out, and then the consultants disappear. If they could pay somebody $2,000 to $3,000 and then just have unlimited dashboard. But anyways, do that whole spiel. But what this does is I can do a high volume thing that's low touch or like low like commitment. So these tweets, right? Like I sit down and write 70 tweets in an hour. Those are all scheduled out. And then I can go in and be like, sweet, I sit down for 10 minutes and I record this video and it'll just be super raw talking about the most viral thing that happened. And then I guess what I'm trying to connect these dots to is to what you're saying of, okay, what are these orders? Another thing that you could probably do as well is look at the questions that are being asked about your industry and then answer those questions yourself. Yeah. So go find every keyword related to content marketing or like content repurposing. And then you answer those questions in videos. And it's just like you monologuing about this topic. And then maybe like the editing is just throw it into the script, studio sound, remove ums and ahs and shorten word gaps. And then it's live 30 minutes later.
There's one thing that I think there's a couple of things that you can do to just expand on your process. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because it's becoming a process that we're calling the listening system internally over here. So let's say that you're a client and I know that your ideal customer is a founder that just raised seed and they're in biotech. Okay. What blogs, what newsletters, what creators are they following? Let's go sort by most popular content. Let's say on what can we sort on? Let's use YouTube.
But YouTube as an example. What shorts went most viral?
What shorts went most viral? That is now the inspiration for your next tweet or your next video.
Fuck, that is so good. It's so simple. It's so good.
It's so simple. By the way, this is what Sam Parr did at The Hustle to create banger content. All he did is he figured out who his customer was, where they read content or what content they watch. And then
you looked at the most,
you look at the most viewed content and then write content about that or just rewrite it. And so let's take this a step further. Let's copy it even more. If there's a headline of a news article or a blog or whatever that is, I need to stop using the word viral. It doesn't need to have gone viral, it just needs to perform well. You can literally start your video off with that headline. That's the hardest part, is writing the hook. So just steal the first 2 seconds and then add on to it. Or whatever, add your piece after the fact. But open with something that has already worked. So a lot of what I'm doing for the few clients that I have is that let's just go find the low hanging fruit. And it might be a problem that that hasn't been solved, or it might be something that's topical, or it doesn't really matter. The point is it likely going to perform, so that we're spending less time creating content that doesn't work versus banger content?
Totally. So to break that down into like tactical steps. So I'm a founder, say I'm doing something and for like credit unions. I just saw this company that went through YC and it's like some type of AI tool for credit unions. So I'd go find what's all the content related to credit unions that's out there. What's the most viral stuff that other people have done or most viewed or whatever that word is you want to use. Create that catalog. And then we go and we remake that content with our own spin. And then you just turn that into a process where it's, okay, how do we do this indefinitely for the next 5 years or whatever? Is that kind of how you're envisioning that, or what's that?
No, that's pretty close. I think for the credit union, you've got to think about who their customer is. So you're creating content based on that. But yeah, ideally, it's not just a one-off thing. It's something that we can turn into a recurring segment. So YouTubers do this a lot. Podcasters do this a lot, like Scott Galloway, Gary Vaynerchuk, Ryan Trahan, Mr. Beast. They all have a format that they repeat. So Scott Galloway has his office hours. Gary V had Wine Library. Ryan Trahan had the Penny series, et cetera, et cetera. Ideally, there's just one format that we can make 1,000 videos about. And so I heard Colin Samir say this. recently, your job is to maybe find like build 4 of those recurring segments. And then the 5th post every day is testing something new. You should always have a stable of recurring content. And
dude, it's just an 80-20 rule. So 1 and 4. Yeah.
but yeah, like the algorithm wants you to create content that it knows your audience will like. And so your job is to feed it content that is likely to feed a consistency. And so, and this is a nice like segue to something else I wanted to talk about quickly is there's a company called Media Scaling, and it's like kind of scammy looking. I think it is. Maybe I don't think it's a scam.
Oh, I saw that. I saw this YouTube video. Well, I did in the show notes. I saw the founder. What's his name? Brett or something? I can't remember. He just interviewed the founder.
Brett. I think Brett interviewed the founder. Yeah. And so what they're doing is they're creating like 10 secondary accounts.
Okay, I'm doing this in music right now. For my friend who's a famous country music artist. Like he's going on tour with Luke Combs. Anyways, I'll let you know what happens. Like we're figuring out how to build this out, but we're going to build out like 10 channels across all platforms. And then basically I'm going to have VA schedule out content to each of those. Exactly. Obviously we'll have to make these accounts with like separate IPs, and then we'll connect them to the like our like scheduling software. But anyways, So sorry, go tell me what you're saying.
I think that worked for a lot of people. I think it doesn't work for who I'm targeting. So let's say I want to close a CEO of a business that's doing 20 million a year. Yeah. I can't pitch him, hey, we're going to create a bunch of secondary sub accounts to you that are just a derivative of your name. So like
totally
Willie Nelson versus Will Nelson.
Totally.
It wouldn't work with my name, but that's not going to fly. MFM or My First Million did this. I don't know if they use this agency, but they have a bunch of TikTok accounts that are derivatives of MFM. Yeah, I can't list the handles, but you get it. Yeah, it works for some, doesn't work for others. But what I just described with Prof G and Gary, like they're doing that, but in a much better way, more respectable way, at least, where they have Daily V. I can't think of all of Gary's shows.
No, yeah.
Scott has, I might have to look at it.
I don't know if it makes sense for them though, too. I don't know. If you're playing towards the algorithm, right? Say you're B2B and you go towards the algorithm, like you're going to go to the natural part of the bell curve, which is going to end up in consumer land where you're not actually creating demand like generation for your company. I would way rather have a smaller list where it's 10,000 people with buying power, right? And I think what you're saying is basically the same idea. Just because you have 100 different handles across all like channels that are posting, like what you're going to see is that doesn't really provide value if you're just trying to sell 20 CP people that are like, oh, these people are our actual buyers. So I just think that it's a whole, I guess what I'm trying to say is like that, I don't think that would work in the B2B landscape, but I think that we can take ideas from that. And then this idea of, cool, we're going to make all these clip variations and test them. I think that's a really, like, that idea plays here. But then so to your point, it's like, it's like a pick and pull. What can I take from each of these places and then apply it in this B2B like space? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And generally I agree. I think I'm really stretching to figure out how that strategy works in B2B. I don't think it does, unless you have 2 ideal customers and you want to create 2 separate shows for them. Then all of a sudden you have 2 handles, but they're solving different problems. But for most companies in seed or going to Series A, they have a few, probably like 1 ICP. I don't know. You'd be better to comment on that. But if you were to try to adapt or adopt that strategy, you're not creating multiple handles for your name. What you're doing is creating multiple shows that address
for each of those customers. Definitely. Like for us, I'm just thinking about, and we have this solo content creator like customer, and for them, it's like way different content than you're a agency or network and you're managing 400 shows. So the content, that strategy, like that source material that you're making for each of those individuals are entirely different. And like the tactics could be the same for the distribution, but you just have to like,
that's right.
Anyways, that's interesting. Yeah, totally. I like
you're
that.
right. The inputs have to double because
so it's not about the like distribution volume across multiple handles. Right. It's the source information that's different. But anyway, I know we're coming up on time, or at least I think so. Will, where can people find you? We could talk for days. I'm going to have you on in 4 months or whatever, 3 months, once the company's like up to scale. I want to hear everything that you've learned, but where can people find you if they're trying to get in touch with you?
Yeah, just one place. Find me on Twitter at Mr. Will Nelson, and everything's linked from there.
Cool. Sounds good. We'll add that in the show notes as well, so make it easy for people. But thanks again, brother. I swear to God, this is one of my favorite conversations I've had in the last 2 months.
Oh,
so
good.
I'll be your time, man.
That's awesome. Yeah. I appreciate your time always. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again.